Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslims for Progressive Values. I'm your host, Kendra Cordova, and today we are joined by Lily. She's here to tell us a little bit about her queer Muslim experience. So, hey, Lily.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you
Walaikum
for having me.
salam. So, I guess the first question here is what brought you to Islam? Like, were you born into a Muslim family or are you a revert?
I'm a revert. I reverted January of 2018.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
it's been a few years now.
hmm
How did you find Islam?
It was a journey. So I've always been a spiritual person. I was raised Christian, Southeast Missouri, evangelical Pentecostal Christian.
Okay.
And yeah, I just went on a journey after I left Christianity. I looked into Buddhism and I have looked into and explored yoga and some aspects of Hinduism. And I didn't like bump into Islam until I started listening to some Sufi music by accident.
Okay.
And I was just sitting in the floor of my living room listening to this one specific song. I'm probably going to butcher how to say it because it's in Urdu, but Tajik Tare Haram. And I was just weeping. I had no idea what they were saying, nothing. And so that kind of got me into this like deep dive into, where'd that come from? Islam, Sufism, how, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I ended up going on a pre-planned trip to India with my friend for yoga. Um, and instead of doing yoga while I was there, I ended up spending a lot of time in Muslim communities for the first time. And I bought my first Quran, I bought my first prayer mat. And when I came back, I had met who is now my ex, but he happened to be a Muslim just at a park. He came up and started talking to me. And he taught me a lot. And after a few months, I decided to take my Shahada. So,
Wow. Okay,
yeah,
wow. So this is like not even just like a metaphorical journey, but like a literal journey, like across
yeah.
the world to meet Muslims. Very like eat, pray, love almost. I love it. Okay, so that is awesome. Oh, in a minute we'll get to like what about Islam you love specifically and really like deep diving into that. But that's the Islamic side of your identity. Let's look at the other side too. And this is a unique part that I think as a queer Muslim myself, many people will hear this and they'll sort of be like, what? Because there's this like contradiction, but we're going to talk about like how we blend them, how we
Mhm.
celebrate it and everything. But so you are Muslim, but you are also under the LGBTQ umbrella here. So how do you identify? And then tell us a little bit about that journey for you and discovering that part of yourself.
So I am a trans woman. I started my transition how many years ago now? About 14 years ago.
Okay, so the transition came before the finding of Islam.
Yes, yeah. And that was a huge part of my sort of spiritual journey too, figuring out who I was, who I, was told to be when I was younger versus how I was on the inside. And as I developed in my transition, my spiritual path also changed and developed as well. And now I'm very stable in both of them. But I definitely, I would say there were a lot of roads that I didn't expect coming into Islam as a trans woman, and so I think I've grown from those as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So love that. Let's talk about, as you said, there's like a lot of like blending here as we go through
Uh,
Islam. I know you brought up Sufism, but how do you sort of find yourself blending the two in your life, living as a trans woman and then as a Muslim trans woman?
I mean, in full honesty, I never had an issue. Uh, I wouldn't say issue. I never considered blending it necessarily for the longest time. It wasn't until I was more active on social media like TikTok when the opposition of who I am kind of started stepping forward and saying all these things. And of course, I had heard them, but day to day, when you're speaking to people or you're speaking to other Muslims, most of the time, they're not going to say anything, you know? So I had to kind of really learn how to navigate that with studying the history and uh, just some looking at the hadiths and looking at, weak hadiths, this, that, and the other. Anyway, and yeah, so I guess it's not so much blending as it is just existing stably, if that makes sense.
Yes,
It's
yes.
I feel like blending is kind of makes it sound like you're forced to mix these two aspects that are totally separate into one thing, but I don't necessarily find them separate. They're both just a part of who I am.
I love that. I really love that. Yes. I think I end up using the word blending only because of some of that opposition that many queer Muslims face,
Totally.
where like a lot of the LGBTQ community, very few of them tend to be Muslim that we run into. And then, vice versa, many of the Muslims we run into are very LGBTQ community. So I know for me personally, sometimes it can feel like these two separate things and sides going on. But I really like how you talk about your existence and how it's not really like blended, it just is.
Yes.
And when we're alone or with the people that understand us, I know that that's definitely how it feels. And most of us feel is just that it is, right?
Mhm.
Um, that is how Allah made us, and we love Allah and we love Islam, and then that's it, right?
Exactly.
Um, yeah, and I think one of the questions that I wanted to ask on this as well, and then we're going to get in some like the brighter side of it, but I know that there are probably some Muslims watching who might be queer or LGBTQ in some way, or maybe they're not Muslims yet, but they're interested in Islam. I would say when you face some of this opposition online, especially online, because like you said, when people talk to you face to face, there's definitely more respect, I want to say. But when
Yeah.
somebody is behind a screen or a keyboard for some reason that they're hindered from that in certain ways. And so they might say things that they wouldn't necessarily say if they had the time to think about them. It can be very reactive. How do you cope with your existence in the online world without feeling too torn down by it?
That's been an experience and a path of growth for me a lot over the last like 3, 4 years or so that I've had TikTok. At first, it comes in waves. At first, there was like this, I'm standing my ground. Whatever they say isn't going to shake me. And then it's the sort of like the gray areas where you start to do a little bit more research and you start to question yourself a little bit. But then, more research kind of pulls you back to that grounding. I would say when it comes to battling the opposition, just remember that you're not a Muslim for people. You're a Muslim for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And your position isn't to make other people feel better about you and how you exist. It's just to be a good Muslim, be the best Muslim that you can be kind, compassionate, and caring, and give that back to the world. That's what we should be giving, my opinion. And that's what helped me kind of stay grounded through all of that.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Yes, 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 yes. I love going back and reading through the Quran, the sections about how, Allah is the judge. And one of the lines I've always loved as a Muslim who's faced opposition as well in progressive Islam is very common, which was, "Don't fear them, fear me, so that
Yes,
I may, guide you." And I think that's really great because a lot of times as we start to go out, we want to be active Muslims and in our life, but then we'll feel that fear because we're humans, right? Like
of
everybody feels
course. Yeah.
fear. It can be scary. I love the story of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where when he first, saw the angel Jibril, he kind of freaked out, like he got kind of scared. And that's always a very humanizing story to me. And I think seeing that reminds us that sometimes the world can be scary, but that Allah wants us to go out, be brave, be ourselves, be genuine, and be the best form of ourselves that we can be, the best Muslims we can be, like you said. Go out there, show love and compassion, make the world a better place while we're doing it,
Yeah.
even if it's scary.
Yeah. I mean, it's Allah says, am I not sufficient for you? Allah is most sufficient for anything.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. Like, yes, Allah, everything. random people that we've never met. They're not the
Yeah,
judge, right? It's Allah that's the judge. So
exactly.
I love that. So speaking of the Quran, and we just shared some quotes. Do you have some favorite Quran quotes that you like to connect with here?
Yeah, I mean, I think most importantly is remembering, Allah is the most merciful and most compassionate. That's repeated over and over and over again. And I just think that because it's repeated so much, it's something that we need to hold in our hearts. Allah is so merciful and so compassionate. And then going back to what I just shared on Surah Azir 39:36, where he says, is Allah not sufficient for his servant? You know, so remembering that Allah is merciful, compassionate, and absolutely sufficient. Those are probably my two favorite points.
I love that. And I also love bringing up, like you said, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the most compassionate and merciful, because those are the names that we use in Salah prayer every day, all the time.
Exactly.
Like out of all of the names of Allah that we use, those are just the constant, most pronounced, most used. And those are the ones that Allah really wanted us to connect with here is those specifically, the compassion and the mercy.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing your quotes. Those are great. I guess also while we're on the topic of, the Quran and Islam, I see that you are a niqabi. Um, what got you into wearing niqab? What was your hijab journey like there?
So that was a fun one. Actually, it's probably one of my favorite kind of parts of my journey to share, in full honesty. So I remember when I first started my uh, my path with Islam, when I first started studying it, I had this urge to just I wanted to wear hijab. I wanted to wear hijab, but I was so wrapped up in how far I had come with my transition. There was this part of me that was like, why would I want to cover that? You put all this work into it. Why would I want to cover that? Or my hair, and I know this is the case for a lot of women who start covering, is when, their hair is their sort of social shield, and it's hard for them to let go of that. It's hard for them to start covering it. And, it takes a long time to realize that your hijab is also your shield, you know. Um,
I love that.
so, oh, I'm sorry.
I said I love that. That's a great quote. I love it.
Um, and after, you know, my hijab journey was also on and off. Like there were times when, especially in the first year, when I started wearing hijab, I went through some really traumatic things. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people is, they get devoted and then life throws them a curveball because, we're promised that we'll be tested. And so I took it off and I was like, I just can't do this, I don't know. But then the thing is once I started, when I attempted to kind of step back a little bit, I missed it. And so after another year or so, I got more confidence and I got more strength. I built more strength. I started reading the Quran more and spending more time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then I decided to put it back on full time. And then I had going back to what I had mentioned earlier, where I had talked about why would I want to cover everything that I've had done with my transition. I didn't start wearing niqab until a little while into being on TikTok. And I realized through TikTok even that I was spending so much time worrying about how I looked on TikTok. And then I had like this sort of kind of epiphany of this doesn't need to be what it's about for me personally. So then I started getting this itch to wear niqab, not because, obviously there's no jurisdiction that it has to be worn or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it was a personal choice to say, I'm giving something up for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm wearing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not showing my personal idea of beauty constantly or being distracted by it constantly or spending an hour getting ready constantly. It's just me kind of giving that personal sacrifice. And
Love that. I love
yeah,
that. And of course, Muslims for progressive values and progressive Islam in general. Like you said, it doesn't have this like compulsion, this like you must wear a hijab. to be a Muslim in
Right.
any way. But I did want to hear from you, like what your hijab journey was, because being a trans Muslim woman and then having the whole like hijab aspect of Islam can also be
Mhm.
complicated. So yeah, I wanted to hear that. That's really great. I love it.
Thank you.
Um, I love that it did that for you. Like for me, I kind of had like a similar up and down, and I think that's why a lot of people say like hijab is a journey.
Hmm.
I like that phrase because you really, as a Muslim, go out into the world each day and decide like, how can I be the best Muslim? What does that mean for me? Right.
Right.
And of course, there are Muslims who, wear hijab full time or dress super modestly, and then they're still cruel as people, which, kind
Yeah.
of defeats the whole purpose, right? Or vice versa. And so hijab is one of those more complicated ones. And I wanted to ask too, with you being trans, because hijab and its expression in Islamic communities overall tends to be very tied into gender and gender expression here,
Hmm.
right? No, like if a man who is, whether he's a cis man or a trans man, were to like put on a headscarf, that would be, that would be like a point of contention here for many people.
Hmm.
Um, in the same way, if a cis woman or a trans woman is to not wear one, that can also be another point of contention. So it's an interesting overlap as far as the intersectionality between gender expression and an Islamic expression as well. I think that's very interesting. Um, so I did also want to ask you, since we're on MPV here, um, when was the first time that you sort of heard of MPV before? And what are some of the things that you found interesting, either on the website or the documents or the people you met there?
Well, I first heard of MVP like probably the first year of my journey into Islam because I was doing a lot of research. You deep dive, and I think it could have very well been a YouTube video that I found. There was a lecture or a seminar, I believe, that was being given. I can't remember who it was by, but it was talking about kind of the history and um, what's the word I'm looking for? History and sort of construct around how trans people were viewed throughout history in
Mhm,
Islam. And just the way that he spoke about it gave me so much hope. And it was like in a classroom setting, there was a camera in the background and he was just talking in front of a whiteboard and giving, this whole response. But I was like, oh my gosh, this is, you know, something I want to be a part of or something that I want to keep my eyes on and something that I want to learn from. And yeah, so it's been a point of joy and learning ever since.
I love that. I guess also just one last question on MPV. Is there anything, as a follower of MPV and now a commentator here with us, that you would like to see MPV do more of?
Uh, I mean, I think, for the most part, I feel like there was, back then, especially when I was watching that, just having some, for trans Muslims specifically, obviously that's my sort of dynamic. For trans Muslims specifically, giving some like really good lists of books or just like another lecture like there was, but instead of like in the classroom setting, have just kind of more clear uh, like set layouts for the discussion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah. I don't think we have any new videos up there on trans Muslims, so that's a really
Yeah.
good suggestion. We should get some of those out there for sure. Okay, and then I guess our final question here is, and then you can add anything else you've thought of, but final question for this is just if there are any trans Muslims or LGBTQ Muslims watching this right now that are going through their own stuff, I guess what would you have to say to them? Like, what would you want to tell them?
Don't give up learning. Don't give up trying, and don't let the cruelty of other people push you away from Islam. I've seen, unfortunately, so many Muslim friends or very excited new trans Muslims who just dive in and then they get so hurt and so pushed out they leave within a year or less. And I just want to say, don't give up. Look at why you became a Muslim to begin with. Understand why you're a Muslim. Keep doing your research, keep learning, and keep standing your own ground, and you will flourish.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm sure that they love to hear that. And it's true. Yes. Like keep, like we were saying at the beginning, keep living for Allah, do everything that you do for Allah, right? And then
Yeah.
as long as you're doing that, a lot, the rest of it can wash away, right? Was there anything else you wanted to add on this video before we head out?
I'm just super thankful for this opportunity. Thank you for thinking of me to do this interview. It's honestly my pleasure, and I'm so glad that you get to put these videos together, and hopefully you get more people to interview. And yeah,
Of course, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I've been watching your story for a while now, so I found you very inspiring. So when we were looking at some Muslims to bring on here, I was like, yes, I know a great one for our first interview. So
thank
very
you.
excited. And for anybody who's watching, if you are looking for a progressive place to put your zakat money, you can always donate to Muslims with Progressive Values. I will put the link in the description for the Give Butter account for that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, I am always looking for new Muslims from diverse backgrounds to interview for our show. So you can email me at mpvwithkendra@gmail.com. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.